everyone. How's it going today? Today, I guess we're going to talk to you about activism, but just want to introduce myself again. I'm Anna, and I'm talking about Nicaragua today.
And I'm Sneha, and I'll be talking about India.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, you want to go down to
Oh, yeah. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Did you want to start here?
We can start here. So, y'all saw Josh's presentation, I think it was last week. And this is just a quick recap. I know he already asked you guys this question, but what do you define activism as? And you can give an example, maybe something that you've seen in the news or in your town. And if you want to come up to the camera and share what you think, what is activism? What's your definition? That would be great.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong part.
It's okay. It's all good.
So yeah, you can switch if you want to Anna to the
Okay, great. There we go.
That's fine.
Okay, there we go.
Oh yeah. Also, what do you think of when you think of activism? What are some images that come to mind? Maybe some pictures you've seen, things like that. If you want to come up to the camera, or if you want to draw some images that you can think of and share them, that'd be great too. I don't know if y'all have paper. You can take a piece of paper out and draw on it.
Yeah. Maybe we could give you like a minute and then just like draw something.
The two things that I guess kind of come to mind whenever we're talking about activism would be like maybe signs that would like state an opinion or like a fact on the matter, and then like maybe a shirt depicting another fact or opinion.
Yeah. Very true. A lot of people use signs. First, we're going to talk about activism in India and a really big movement that has been going on for a few years. It's called the Nirbhaya movement, and yeah. So, some quick facts about the movement. It was started in 2012 or early 2013. In December of 2012, this girl, she was a med school student. She was, I think, like 22 or 23 years old. She was riding on a bus with her friend, and they were just alone. It was like late at night. They just finished studying. They were trying to go home, and there was a group of men on this bus, and they raped both her and her friend, and then they beat her and they killed. Beat both of them and they killed her. But her friend was not killed. She was just beaten and raped, but she was not killed. So this friend of Anindra spoke out about it, about Jyoti and their experience and how Jyoti was killed. And there was a lot of outrage because it was in New Delhi, which is the capital of India, and it was like in on a public bus, and it was like in the, I mean, as being the capital city of India, it's one of the most populated cities. It's supposed to be the most modern and like liberal cities. It's just supposed to be very like things like this. The fact that something like this could happen created a lot of outrage, and created a lot of anger, and the fact that the men were not really being held accountable created a lot of anger. So the whole Nirbhaya movement started around that. And Nirbhaya is a name the public gave to Jyoti, who was the one who was killed, in order to honor her. It was really, really big in 2013. There was lots and lots of protests. There was crowds. There was a lot of like lobbying in like Congress. There's a lot of legislature that was like passed because of it. And it was really big 2013. It like made the news. It was really big on social media. It made international news. I'm sure. I don't know if y'all saw it. It was 4 years ago, but I don't know if y'all saw it on like CNN and stuff like that. But it was really, really big. Um, it still continues today as a movement, but it's not as active. It's not as like big, but it's still there's still a lot of activism going on today, trying to change how the government and how people respond to things like this. And the whole point of it was to stop violence against women and to get justice and to get, I guess, like laws passed that can prevent things like this. So I have a few pictures coming up. These are all from the movement in 2013. As you can see, there was lots and lots of crowds. There was lots of signs being made. There was like walks and rallies. If you go to the next slide, there's even like there's just a lot. Everyone held candles to I guess memorialize Jyoti, who was killed, to like keep her in the memory and to remember her. And yeah, so because of this movement, because of all the rallies, the government actually, and because of all the social media was had a huge impact on this movement, because before information wasn't really like movements weren't like able to get this big because information wasn't passed easily between the different states of India and between the different governments because of language barriers. There's hundreds of languages in India and not everyone understands each other. So it wasn't like previous protests were not able to get this big, but because of the rise of social media and like apps like WhatsApp was really big, Facebook was really helpful. Because of that, it gained international attention and it gained the attention of the government. So because of that, the government decided to set up fast track courts in every state just to deal with cases like this, so that it wouldn't have to be the law, because cases in India just have a very long process of having to be like going through like the local like the police station and then having to be reviewed by them and then going into like a higher level until it finally gets into the courts. And it was just really difficult to even like, especially for the victim or the survivor or anyone who is like in or representing them. It was really difficult for them to continue the process because of their own like, it was very expensive to do the like continue that process and stuff like that, and so a lot of times justice was not found. So the government decided to create fast track courts just to deal with cases like this, so that they could go into the courts as quickly as possible. And also they decided to change a lot of the management of these cases. Survivors and victims of like their relatives can now submit complaints online instead of having to go to a local police station and talk to a person. A lot of times women, especially like in these cases, were laughed at or were told that they were responsible, so they did not want to report cases, or if they did, they were literally laughed at by policemen, and so it was like very traumatizing. So now if they were afraid of having to deal with someone in person, they could now submit complaints online and be and the cases would be processed, I guess, objectively, instead of someone like looking at them personally. It would be processed without their personality getting into it or whatever. People who now help the victims in these times, like if they see someone being like getting like beaten or getting raped or stuff like that, people who help them can no longer get in trouble. Even if they use violence, they cannot get in trouble, not like serious trouble like they could have in the past. And also there's a whole new training thing that was put in place for police, and also more women were being hired into the police force to deal with these issues, because men, just because of the patriarchal system, were not able to deal with this sensitively, or they were not trained to. But now there's a whole new training system in place to train both men and women in the police force into dealing with these kinds of cases properly. And they also created the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013 that was really, it was because of this case that they created this amendment to deal with cases like this. And also they started women's only bus services and women's only coaches on trains, so that they, in case a woman felt like they needed that, they could have that option. And also there was a fund that was started to help women who have been in these situations. So there was a lot of changes that took place in India, but obviously the problem is far, far from being over. There's still a lot of cases, especially in rural areas, of people, of women and even men, like being raped, being beaten. There's a lot of cases of um, just violence for no reason, and survivors don't feel safe speaking out. So there's a lot of changes that can happen. All the changes that I said were mostly in big cities and in really like populated areas, but in really like in like smaller cities or like places that are far away from the main justice system, or the main court system, it's really hard to get any sort of recognition or any sort of justice. So yeah, there's a lot of change that still needs to happen, but like I said, the Nirvana movement is still active today. And yeah, so these are some more pictures from the time. As you can see, there was millions of people came out. India is the second most populated country in the world, so if you can just think of like all the women in India, just them coming out, and then also, as you can see, there are lots of men who came out to support as well. Like there's a huge movement. I think the next picture really like shows like how many people came out. This was just in like one small city. This wasn't even in Delhi. Yeah, it was a huge turnout, which this is why it like really gained attention.
So I'm going to talk about Nicaragua and women's rights. So just like a review again. So Nicaragua is in Central America, and it's about the size of Maryland. The capital is Managua. They speak Spanish. They gained their independence in 1821. They mainly rely on like textiles, agriculture, and coffee and beef and gold for their main exports and revenue, and they're mainly Christian, like Roman Catholic, and evangelical nation. So I just wanted to let you know that like women have had a very long history of role like in women's rights in Nicaragua, and so something very complicated is the Nicaraguan Revolution. It's very difficult to understand, but essentially in 79, you had like the rebels, the Sandinistas, ending this 44-year dictatorship from the Somoza family. And so some of the main goals of the Sandinista movement, or like Sandinista National Liberation Front, was to empower, they wanted to empower women, improve education and literacy, and like redistribute land for agriculture. So essentially in 1980, after ending this dictatorship, they implemented a lot of different social programs to help with these goals, to help achieve these goals. However, this was interrupted by the U.S. It was interrupted by the U.S. And who tried to interfere in Nicaragua because they were afraid that it was becoming like too much of a communist society. And you have to think like this was a time of we were still in the Cold War, so the U.S. interfered, which is still kind of scandalous today. But in 84, you had the Sandinista elected president. However, in 1990, the Sandinistas were out of political control. And so you had a loss of like social programs that they had worked to build up in the 80s, and you started to lose those in the 90s. But so women, they just do have this history. And so women had a really big role within the Sandinista revolution, within the revolution. And so they created an organization called the Association of Nicaraguan Women Confronting the Nation's Problem, or it was renamed the Luisa Amanda Esponisa Women's Association. And this was honoring the first woman to die fighting in the ranks of the FSLN. So there were lots of women in the military. They were fighting in the guerrilla militia. They were guards. But they were also created a support network. So mothers are seen as like the backbone of the nation. And so they relied on women's help to create safe houses to feed, clothe, and shelter soldiers and political activists. They organized medical care. They carried messages and food to refugees hiding in the mountains, and they rallied for political prisoners. So this is a picture of a woman soldier, which sometimes like we don't think of as much, but because women were so powerful in this movement, they really started gaining recognition. However, they still have not achieved women's equality and are still fighting for it today. But a huge problem now is a thing that is being coined, the term like is femicide, which is the violent and deliberate killing of a woman. And so essentially there's domestic violence, especially in Central America, is a huge problem. It's a problem worldwide, as we just saw in Sneha's presentation. But I have a video that I wanted to show you all. It's just about 1 minute. And also, just if you see anything or hear anything, there shouldn't be anything too graphic in this video. But if you ever feel uncomfortable, like you definitely feel free to raise your hand and tell Ms. Perry Sanderlin, like if you do feel uncomfortable at all. But this is just kind of an idea of what is going on and why women are so upset. It's a big problem within Nicaragua and Central America. Sorry, let me just unplug something. Sorry, I just have to move places really quickly. But essentially, there's a law that came in place in 2012, and it was against domestic violence against women. And so they defined femicide as a specific crime and expanded the legal definition of gender-based violence to include economic and psychological violence against women, and created stronger measures to protect them. They also banned the use of mediation in cases of violence as well. And so mediation essentially like gives time in order for people to go into courts and talk. It will prevents them from going to court directly and gives time to the males to talk to the women. But that can also lead to more violence and doesn't give women the protection that they need. And so essentially, it's not good. And then in 2013, you had changes to the law because it gained criticism. And because they said that, like, without mediation, it was breaking up families. And so then in 2013, they allowed it. And so that also gained criticism because it was seen as, like, very retrogressive. And then another rule, a very harsh ruling against women, is that abortion is a crime in all circumstances. So even, like, if the life or health of a woman or girl is at risk, or she's, like, a victim of rape, then it's criminalized if she wants to get an abortion. So this is not good because women should obviously, like, have a right to their body, and it's up to them and their doctors for their decision. And to be criminalized in every single instance is very upsetting. So I just have a few pictures of different rallies and social movements. So women have a very strong movement. You can see this is, like, specifically regarding the Law 779, which is about domestic violence here. And then in this one, you can see, like, different rallies. So this is, like, this says, like, a free life of violence. And this was in the town I lived in Matagalpa. This is my host sister right here. I actually stole these from her Facebook page because she's so involved in these different movements. And Matagalpa is a small town, but it was just, like, when I was there, I could feel the feminist movement, and I was able to be involved in that, and that was really cool. So also like just quickly supporting the LGBTQ community. I was there for their day of like sexual diversity. Again, this is like my host sister, and this is me, and it's just saying like I'm free of prejudice. So there's a very strong movement within Nicaragua for women's rights. Wrapping up, we just kind of want you all to reflect and discuss on these ideas. So if anybody like could come up to the camera and tell us maybe what like if you see some of the same issues or types of activism in Nicaragua and India, like as are in the US as you do in Nicaragua or India. Or you could tell us like what issues are important for you as well. We would love to hear about that.
So if you guys want to take maybe a minute or so to discuss with your table or to write ideas, either way, and then we'll take some volunteers.
All right, make sure you have somebody, one person per table that can come up and discuss, because y'all are very quiet today. So figure out what you can share, discuss what you collaborate, and then be prepared to share.
Yeah, and you can also talk about maybe like who's responsible for fighting for these issues and why you think that is. With any of these questions, we'd love to hear from you.
And when you're ready, you can come up. It's just like yesterday. When you're ready, you can come up and share.
This issue reminds me of really reminds me of Colin Kaepernick.
Okay, yeah. Can you tell us more about why you think that? Yeah, like why do you think, what is similar? Can you like give us any specific examples?
Like, since he's like basically protesting police brutality, and like since they're like basically attacking people, innocent people for no reason, just like the situation in India and I forgot the name.
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, he has started a really big activist, like a movement, which is really awesome, about police brutality against people of color, so and minorities. It's very similar, at least to the movement in India, and also the movement in Nicaragua. So.
Yeah, he's definitely become a face for movement similar to the movement in India. Great. Anyone else?
And also going back to our question from the beginning, what do you think are some things that are important to a movement that can like make them successful or bigger than like what are some elements that can make movement successful? Just from seeing what we had in our presentation, even.
Yeah, or maybe like you could tell us about how these make you feel, or like if you agree with these movements or don't, like anything you really want to reflect on and share is okay. Okay, all right. I'm going to play a video for you, actually, and let me know what you think of it. Okay, And this kind of goes along with our question of like, who should be fighting for women's rights, or like who should fight in a social movement. So maybe if you guys can watch the video and may respond in relation to thinking about like the social movements for women's rights in India and Nicaragua, and how that relates to this. So based on that video and our presentations on what we have like shown you about women's rights, who do you think like should be participating in these social movements and issues? Like, should everyone, should just the group affected be participating? Like, should only women be involved in a women's movement? You guys can discuss like for maybe like 30 seconds with a partner, and then you could also respond to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
If you're ready, it's the same people each time. I'm confused.
I think it's good for men and women to support these issues, because like if men join, then it'll mean like maybe more men will be comfortable joining, and vice versa.
That's great. Yeah.
That's very, very cool.
I think everyone should help protest, because it affects everyone in some way.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to come up with any questions you have also, or thoughts that you've had in this presentation.
Yeah. We love to hear from you. So please ask us anything about social movements. Not about social issues, it's totally okay. Okay, well, if you guys don't have any more questions for us, then I think we can probably go ahead and wrap this up. We're getting pretty close to the end of your class period anyways, but just, you know, kind of as a review, like women's rights are very important in India and Nicaragua, and you see that a lot of times movements occur after one event. Like one event will spur an entire movement, and that has grown with like the use of social media especially. But you see people like gathering, you know, over specific laws, and they want to see changes in policy, like whether it's about just defining what maybe femicide is, or, you know, adding safer bus routes for women, or in general, you know, they want to see real changes enacted, which is super important in, you know, a great result of these social movements and activism. And then lastly, you know, we have to think about maybe who should be involved in these social movements, in activism, what issues are important to you. And if an issue isn't like super important to you, like why do you think it's important to others, and maybe why, like, should you be involved as well? Which is something maybe we see in the He for She campaign, with like men getting involved in women's movements for women's rights. So if you think of any more questions, we would love to hear them, write them down, and send